before, right? So just in case anyone's like, "What? Isn't he fancy?" Not really, not really. We'll talk about Grimsby in a second. Don't you worry, don't you worry. You know, I know who I am. So new communion thing. I don't know if anyone's seen it. We had that at Soul Survivor, the new communion thing, where you have to kind of share the cups and so on. And I tell you, Lois Dempster, she does not want to share cups with no one. And so she was ready. And like the guys were like, she was like, what am I going to do? I was like, you're going to be first, Lois. And there was like a fire in her eyes. And I tell you, you put Usain Bolt on her at a line, but if it's to communion, he's got no flipping chance. Like she is like a bullet from a gun. So I turned around and I was like, yep, Dempster's first, of course. She's doing it. So that's good. So for those of you who don't like sharing, you've just got to take Lois on. Good luck to you in that one. But today we're going to be talking about idols. It's not something we talk about a lot in church, not something we think about a lot in church. We kind of think, oh, well, we don't have necessarily tons of little statues and idols around. And I don't know, some people's story is that they've had to get rid of that kind of stuff. But for most of us, we don't think of it kind of in that way. But my kind of first thought on idols is kind of who was or is my idol kind of growing up, and who is it that is kind of a hero and that you would look up to. And so, Rob, if you would put our first hero up. I mean, I almost don't need to tell anyone who this is, because obviously we all know. Does anyone know who this is?
David Kardashian.
It's not David Beckham or Kim Kardashian. He's a mix of the two, believe it or not. No one. It's very... No, I thought... I did not pay for this man. That's a different story. I did pay for a weird story. No, this guy's called Clive Mendonca. Before Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, there was Super Clive. Super Clive Mendonca. He scored so many goals for Grimsby and then left because he was too good. Broke all of our hearts. And so your heroes sometimes fail you. My second one, you definitely won't know who these guys are. And so the second ones are... There we go. They are two brothers called Oliver and Paul Collier, and they invented Championship Manager, the football game, which became Football Manager. And they got me through school, college, university. I mean, and when I say got me through, they definitely ruined some of my grades in school, college, and university. But they were heroes. And we'd be like, oh, there's a new Championship Manager coming out. Very exciting. If we flip it to kind of modern day, without kind of sucking up too much, I'm getting a little bit whistly, a little bit louder. Someone's there, Chris. Oh, there we go. They're not even here. So I'm going to be nice to them, even though they went and planted a church like traitors. And so Lucas and Sarah, it has been great to kind of start and plant churches with them. And I have had the kind of honor of seeing them kind of sacrifice and give stuff away and just kind of live in a way where they have had to trust God for just a million different things in a million different ways. And it's been really great to kind of see, man, there's, you know, this kind of how do we start church and not having an idea, but having these guys going, yeah, but God's with us and God's calling us to do it. And that has been great. And slightly bigger and more important than them is my fourth and most current hero, of course. And Papa John's the pizza, not the man. The man said some bad things, and so the pizza is fine. And so you can't be racist if you're a pizza, I don't think, so that's okay. And so at that stage, those are kind of my heroes, but all of them will let you down at some point. They're not perfect. Even Lucas and Sarah will let us down. And so we're going to see that we can't put our hopes in those kind of things. And I think most of us would know, of course we can't put our hopes in people. People are flawed and people will kind of make mistakes. But really, I think the bigger idols for me is not about people, but it's about stuff. And it's about where do I put my hope in things that aren't God. And there's this good definition of idols that we've got that is from the dictionary, and it's got these three things. And it says, idol is an image or material object representing a deity to which worship is addressed, or an image of a deity other than God. Now, most of us probably won't really clock onto either of those two, but for me, it's this third one. Any person, or particularly for me, thing, regarded with blind admiration, adoration, or devotion. And it was those last sort of two words, that adoration and that devotion. And it was for me like, what things have I got that take so much of my devotion away from God? That I can be devoting so much of my time to these things that I just lose sight of God. And what things do I adore just too much? What things have I put high up that just are taking a place that they shouldn't really occupy, you know? And they're normally not going to be bad things. They're not normally going to be things that are terrible, but when we adore them and when we give them our devotion, then actually they're taking a place that they don't deserve, and they can become idols in our life. And so that is what I'm going to be looking at. That's what I'm going to be thinking of. And we're going to be talking about a God who doesn't want to sit alongside these stuff, but he wants our hearts. And as part of that, therefore, he wants our adoration and he wants our devotion. He doesn't want to share it. He doesn't want to be part of a group. But he says, hey, I deserve more than that. And we're going to walk through and unpack that. So if we look at the next slide's going to take us through the first verses of the Bible. It's not as big as I'd have thought. So we're still in Acts. I know we finished the month of Acts. Full disclosure, me and Lindsay haven't finished the book of Acts yet. I can accept any judgment that's coming our way. We're still going. We're still reading. We haven't given up. We're cracking on, but we're still going. So if you didn't make it through in September, I don't think it makes you terrible. We're still going, so maybe we are just terrible. That's fine. We'll do it. We'll read it in Paris, despite Craig's judgment upon us. So Acts 14, verses 1 to 7 says, at Iconium, Paul and Barnabas went as usual into the usual Jewish synagogue. There they spoke so effectively that a great number of Jews and Greeks believed. But the Jews who refused to believe stirred up the other Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. So Paul and Barnabas spent considerable time there speaking boldly for the Lord, who confirmed the message of his grace by enabling them to perform signs and wonders. The people of the city were divided, some with the Jews, others with the apostles. There was a plot among both Jews and Gentiles, together with their leaders, to mistreat and stone them. But they found out about it, and they fled to the Lycaonian cities of Lystra and Derbe, and to the surrounding country, where they continued to preach the gospel. So the first thing we see is that the gospel, straight away, it comes for our idols. It comes for the kind of things that we've built our life on, and it comes in conflict with the kind of systems of this world, our own culture, and it comes in conflict with our very self. And Chris even talked about that today, where he said, we don't talk about sin much, but you know what? The gospel isn't just this kind of small thing that just comes alongside and helps us. The gospel is something where we've actually had to say, look, we as people are meant to be connected to God, but our own mistakes, our own sin has separated us. We can't hide from that. And what we need is we need to be forgiven and we need to be restored. And that doesn't come from just getting there ourselves. That comes from laying down our lives and picking up a new life when we accept that, you know what, Jesus, he died for those things, and that in trust in him, and that he will give us a new life, and only him. Now, if you're a Jew and you hear that message in that kind of synagogue, that is going to cause a reaction. And that's what we see in the story. At no point did the Jews just go, well, Paul and Barnabas, that might be your truth. You might be saying Jesus is the Messiah, but you know what? To us, he's not the Messiah. Fair enough. They'd have been like, right, one of two things is happening here. Either this Jesus you're telling me about, he is the Messiah, and in which case, everything that I'm thinking, I've missed it, I need to change. And my life needs to change, my mentality needs to change. I need to accept what you're saying and realize that this is a different time now. Or, this guy Jesus is not the Messiah, and what you're saying is absolute blasphemy, and you need to get out of it. One of two things, isn't just if you think that, fair enough. They were like, either you're telling me this deep truth that I've missed and I need to change, or you're absolutely coming against everything in my faith and I can't have it. And that's the reaction that we see. It crashes into the lives of the people and it causes conflict with where they're at. And we see in these verses, if we flip back, Rob, you'll see there some of them side with the Jews and some with the apostles, and the gospel is divisive. It's not as this nice add-on. I know we talk sometimes about a God-shaped hole in our lives, and I'm with that. But sometimes we think that maybe our lives are like a jigsaw puzzle, and if we could just slot God in, you're like, now it all makes sense. And I kind of feel God saying, no, you're building all your life without me. I don't want to just fit a little slot in there. I want you to kind of take these pieces that will never come together, the things that you can never make right yourself, I want you to scrap all that because I've got a different way. And I want to start again. It's not just a small piece of the puzzle. And when we see the gospel, it doesn't just kind of say, okay, that makes sense. I'll just add that into my life. The gospel's saying that God's saying, hey, I want all of you. And Craig's been saying that today. I want every part of you. I don't want to just fit into a little gap that you can create me. I want to make you new, and I want to change everything. And so it comes for whatever we have in our idols. And so we see that here in the story. And I kind of sometimes get to the point where I think, I can just shrug it off, because as I see the gospel, I think, man, it's got to change everything. But I know what it is to go into church or go to a conference or listen to a preach or listen to some music or be praying and hear God say something and go, oh man, yeah, I need to change that. And then think, yeah, maybe. And then just go away and go about the same kind of routine and the same cycle. And we know that it's hard to kind of make change. Some of you will know that a while ago I lost a bit of weight, and so as well as coming to church and getting regularly told off for losing too much weight and that people were trying to feed me up because people are strange, and so but other than that, somebody came up to me and said, why are you doing this, Dale? I said, I'm doing this because I'm a bit fat. I was like, that's kind of what I'm looking at it. And I'm like, well, there's no real point, is there? I was like, I mean, it feels like the point is to be a bit less fat. But I mean, okay. And they went, it's just no point. It's just all going to come back on. I was like, oh, thanks for the encouragement. But I understand, because we're used to seeing people make a change, start, and think, it's just hard, isn't it? And then we just know what it is to just creep back into the same old routine. And that can happen in our spiritual walk. We go, right, God, I'm going to change this, I'm going to do this. And we start, and we go back into the same, and we go back into the same. And I understand that has happened probably to all of us in our life. But I don't want us to think that has to be the way that it has to be. Because I could tell you so many times where I've meant to change, and I find myself just going around the same circle. But I can also tell you times where God has broken in, and things have not been the same. And things have been a lasting change, and things have been different forever. You know, Chris was talking about in the prayer meeting today that God's goodness and God's mercy and his faithfulness and how it endures. And that is the story of so many of us, that we have a God whose goodness endures throughout our lives. And when we change things and when he does it, it lasts and it sticks and it changes it. And it doesn't just kind of think, well, we'll change that for a bit, but in 2-3 weeks when you get tired, you'll go back and things will be the same. And we had a visitor this week to our house, my housemate from university, so a guy called Pierce. And I've known Pierce longer than everybody in this room. I've known him since I was 18 years old, so we've known each other for nearly 10 years. No, we have known each other for 19 years, because I am not young. And so we were chatting away, and he met Lindsay for the first time. We went for dinner, and we're telling our stories, and we're, just kind of reminiscing about our house. And I was explaining how we would have a shared bathroom, and there was 5 men. You can imagine the state of that bathroom. And I'd go down to clean my teeth every morning, and he'd have got up first and had a shower. Every single day without fail, he'd leave his boxer shorts just on the sink in the taps. I've got to clean my teeth here, Pierce. It's not what anyone wants to see. And it was the same pair of boxers every day. And I'm like, that is not pleasant. Unless you've got 20 of these, Pierce, you need to change something. And so we're telling these stories and so on. And in the 3rd year, when I lived in that house with him, I had what many of our young people will probably think is a dream life, because let's be honest, lectures were a side concern of mine at the time, because they weren't that exciting. So I would get up. Am I whistling a little bit in this microphone? I know, I can't do anything about it, because I'm also on sound. And so it's difficult to do that. That's good, we've got a team on it now, so we're fine. I'll move if it's going to be annoying, Dan, just tell me to move mics, and I'll move mics. You just need to unmute the other mics, that's fine. Where was I? Oh yeah, so I had this dream life. I didn't go to lectures. We woke up at 12, sometimes 1, and then we'd go to the chip shop called Mr. Biggs. It obviously doesn't exist anymore. And so Mr. Biggs, we'd just get a chip sandwich, and then we'd go and we'd watch Neighbours, which was a great daytime TV show. Then we'd play FIFA, or we'd play Pro Evolution Soccer, but we'd play FIFA, the equivalent of it in the day, and then we'd play that till 4, then we'd watch the Crystal Maze, and then we'd watch Friends, then we'd play some more FIFA, and then in the end we'd probably go to the pub, and we would do that, and I'd have Chicago Town frozen pizza. And we'd do that every day. I mean, it was a dream, right? I mean, the young people are like, I'll take that, that's a life. I'm all right with that life. It seems like you're playing PlayStation and eating pizza. Yes, I am. And it sounds great, and we had a good time when me and Pierce were talking about those stories. But I remember in the 3rd year, all I was doing was going to church. Nothing else. I was just going to church on a Sunday, and then God didn't exist to me. And the rest of the week, I'd still go to church, nothing else. And so Monday to Saturday, I would just do that kind of routine. And I realized that I kind of just felt just like, man, there's just everything's missing in my life. I just had this kind of dryness and this, like life is fine and fun and so on. but I just feel a bit lost and a bit rotten. And I know now that it's because, I was away from God. Should I just move Mike? It's not the easiest thing. I'm going to move Mike. I do hate the time, Mike. Right, that'll do. We're on. That sounds better, doesn't it? That sounds better. That's fine. I tried to get all fancy with a microphone. It's because I'm going to Paris. And so I wanted to go to a wireless mic, but, I got above myself, Craig. And so I was there in this third year, and I went away to this Christian event. And this guy, I've mentioned this story many times, but this guy he was just praying for me, just a complete stranger. And I'd said to this girl on the phone, I said, I'm just so fed up of worrying about what everyone thinks about me. My mates, worried about what my parents think about me, worried about the future, worried about in church, whether I can lift my hands or not. And I just said all this stuff, and I just went to this meeting. Fine. This guy prayed for me, and he prayed for my exams, because I hadn't done any revision, so you get people to pray for your exams, right? It seems anyone need prayer for the exams? Yeah, I ain't been to a lecture in about 7 weeks, so yeah, please pray for my exams. And so, is it some kind of weird effects on this now? That's my fault. I think I put effects on it when they were singing earlier. It's an absolute disgrace. I might move microphones again. It's like... So anyway, I'll get to the end of this story eventually. And so this guy was praying for my exams. And then after a while, I just said, can I pray again? I went, all right, fine. And he went, I just feel you're worried about what your mates think, about what your parents think, about whether you should raise your hands in worship, about what you should do with your future. And then he finished his prayer, and he looked as scared as I looked. As scared as Lois Dempster was when we announced communion this morning. He was like, did any of that make sense? I just couldn't even speak. I was like, of course it makes. It makes complete sense. And I went at that point like, man, God is real, which is a mad thing to think about when you're 20 and you've already led a Christian union at uni. And I was like, oh, wow, God's really real and he really knows me. And literally from that moment on, I quit. I stopped applying for jobs. I didn't go into the kind of thing. I thought I need to do a gap year because I need to get my kind of time with God back. And I moved to Widnes. And the start of my whole journey of being here in the Northwest is from that moment there where God broke in and it changed everything. So I'm telling you, God brings lasting change. And it's not something that just think, well, I'll do that for a few days and it goes back. It changes. And when God does it, it sticks and it changes. And we want to be a people who say, God, will you do things in our life that last and that stick and that change us? And like going back and doing the youth, sometimes people can say, well, you're doing the same old thing. Like someone at our wedding was like saying to me, oh, you're doing youth again. How many times have you retired from youth and then started doing youth work again? And at that point, I, told them to shut up. And so I just sort of laughed and I was like, I don't know, many times. But I'm not doing youth because I can't think of anything else to do. Believe it or not, I'm not just wandering around going, I just need something in my life. I think maybe it's 40 young people. I think that's what I need in my life. I think I need 40 young people. It was just literally, it came about because we were praying and God told us to do it. And that was the deal, and that is it. Like when I remember the first sort of Sunday I did it and Toby said to me, okay, we just had somebody for a year. We've had somebody for a year before that. And he said, I don't know how long you're going to be around. And I was like, oh man. Okay, and so I remember saying to him right there, I said, I'm going nowhere, son. I was like, well, mainly because I haven't got a plan. So I said, I'm not going anywhere for a while. And that's not because it's my job. It's because God's told us to do it. And what we want to do is we want to stick with the things that God's told us to do and let nothing else come in the way. And I know that kind of when God gives us things, we need to make sure that they are the things that we're doing with everything. That God has our devotion and God has our adoration. And when we're following him, then we need to say, right, what are the things that you want me to do? And they're the things that bring us life, and we need to make sure we're listening to that and doing that. Because they will come at a cost. They will come into contact with some of our other idols in this world where you'll be like, yeah, but I ain't got the time because I've got this responsibility and that responsibility. And sometimes we need to kind of say, okay, but God, if you're calling me to do this, then it takes priority above some of the other stuff. And Lindsay's helping me with that and working out my schedule. And she realizes on a Friday night and on a Tuesday, when I come back from life group or when I come back from youth, when I come back from the men's group, she sees me buzzing. She sees me excited, and we need to do things like that. When I do the church accounts, she does not see me buzzing. She does not see me excited. She sees me relieved that they are done for another month. And that's it. Like she just sees me going, well, they're done. And that tells me that I need to quit the church accounts. So if you want to do them, feel free. Like, I mean, I've tried to quit them for 7 years as well. And so, but the thing is, like, the thing with that is that when God gives us those things, we then need to be careful. Because for me, that takes us, to the second idol. And the second part of the story that we see here. And this is my biggest I would say this is my biggest idol, my biggest issue. And we're going to see that in the next set of verses. So, there's a few verses, so stick with me. In Lystra, there was a man who was lame, and he'd been that way from birth and never walked. He listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked at him, saw he had faith to be healed, and called out, "Stand up on your feet." The man jumped up and began to walk. When the crowd saw what he'd done, they shouted in a language, "The gods have come to us in human form." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the speaker. And the priest of Zeus, whose temple was outside the city, brought bulls and wreaths to the city gates because he wanted the crowd to offer sacrifices. But when the apostles, Barnabas and Paul, heard this, they tore their clothes and rushed into the crowd, saying, "Friends, why are you doing this? We're only human like you. We're bringing you good news, telling you to turn from these worthless things to the living God, who made the heavens and earth and sea and everything in them. In the past, he let all nations go their own way. Yet he's not left himself without testimony. He's shown kindness by giving you rain from heaven and crops in their seasons. He provides you with plenty of food and fills your hearts with joy." Even with these words, he had difficulty keeping the crowd from sacrificing to them. Then some Jews came from Antioch and Iconium and won them over. They stoned Paul, dragged him outside the city, thinking he was dead. But after the disciples gathered around him, he got up and went back into the city. The next day, he and Barnabas left for Derbe. And so for me, this is kind of the biggest idol I probably face. Because here, Paul and Barnabas, they are offered fame. They are offered the chance to be heroes. This guy's been healed, and the crowd are like, "You guys are amazing." And they start thinking, these are gods. And a couple of books that I read suggested that in Lycaonia, they would have had a myth that Zeus and Hermes came down previously, and everyone ignored them except two people who took them in, and then the whole city was wiped out except these two people. So they're probably thinking, "Man, we've never seen anything like this before. Or maybe they're these two gods. It sounds weird, but let's just be better to be safe than sorry, right? If we offer them sacrifices, we'll get away with that." And there's a part of them that probably thinks, well, what harm can it do, right? But I think as we see here, Paul and Barnabas can't have this because they know Jesus doesn't belong on a shelf of myths. He doesn't belong just kind of like, well, touch wood, eh? Let's just add it into that list. Like, let's add Jesus into the list of, just do that, otherwise bad things might happen to us. And they say, no, don't do that. We are not gods. We're not somebody that you need to sacrifice to keep us happy. Let us tell you of a God who came down. Let us tell you of a God who loves you. And they stood and they preached and they talk about the message of God, the real God. Because God doesn't belong just as part of RE. He doesn't belong as like a set of stories we teach our kids. But neither does he belong just as a sidekick to us to help us be heroes, to help us be the masters of our own story and go, he's not like the genie from Aladdin who says, right, I am going to make you great. That's not the thing. And I was prepping this sermon, I kept getting a whole new world in my head, and it was annoying. And so I kept walking around the house singing it. And so, but Jesus is not there just as a sidekick to kind of go, right, let me help you live your best life. He is more than that. He is a God to follow. He's not a guy to bring along on the journey so that will help us on our way. And Paul and Barnabas, they are so determined to say, hey, it is not us. It is not us. Don't worship us because we are not the heroes of the story. The heroes of the story is Jesus, and the hero of the story has always been God, way back, all the way through. And sometimes the things that God gives us to do, we can lose sight of that and say, well, aren't I the hero? Aren't I the one that's kind of making the difference and so on. And I think about the kind of roles that I have within youth and within my job in university, and kind of sometimes I can lose sight of it and know that I'm following God of what he's given me to do, and then there's that tipping point where actually I go, but I'm the hero, right? I'm the one that's sorting this out, and I want to be the one that's needed, and I want to be the one that can fix things and that can repair people. And that is just crazy because there's no way as human beings we can't do it. Like the world does not need, Latchford does not need the 40, 50 of us thinking we're heroes and we can have a go and we can change their lives. Like that is not the message we want to bring, that you can be just like us and you can change people's lives. The message is that we have been changed by our God Jesus, and that same God Jesus can change them. Not us, not me, not my effort, not how hard I can love them. It is them. And even just this week, one of the things that I really feel in my job at the University of Liverpool is that I have these 20 people who I'm academic advisor for in each year. So I have 60 people. And my job is to make sure that they know that they matter. And that is important, because we've had some difficult times at the universities with young people who've ended up taking their life. And I just thought, man, I don't want to look and say that they didn't know that they mattered to us. So I thought, right, I've got 60 people. And I kind of pray for them and I say, God, will you just help me to just show them that they matter, and if that at least some people care, whatever it is, But then this week I had 2 people come into me and said, hey, I don't even know my academic advisor. Can you be my academic advisor? Because mine doesn't seem to be interested. And you know how quick it was going, well, of course I can, because, And it's just like, whoa, where's that come from? But I was so like, well, I'm obviously the best at this. So yeah, please come in. Let's tell everybody that I am the best at it. And I was just like, man, God, that is just so quickly I can knock you off your rightful place and say, hey, I've got this now. I want to be the hero. And I can make my own kind of reputation and my own standing. That can be a real idol for me. And like what people think of me and how important I think I am, that is a real problem. And you know what? And if we live that way, then we'll live for the approval of people. And when they disapprove, we will die at that. And we see that in the end of those verses. We don't need to put it back up where, like, when people don't like him and they won't let him sacrifice to them, they go, right, well, other people have come in, they start stoning him, and they beat him and they nearly die. And what does Paul do? He doesn't go, well, stuff them. Paul gets up and he goes back into the city and he preaches the gospel. And he does that because he's not bothered about his reputation. He's bothered about what God's calling him to do, and he has no idol above that. And he's saying, okay, well, Jesus is the first. And if people like me or if people hate me, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter to him. And I think Paul and Barnabas, they were there not just thinking, well, if we follow God, we get to see all this cool stuff, right? And yes, they do, but that's not the point. And I think as we see, Paul will tell us what the whole point is in Philippians. Paul, the same guy who's been had everybody saying, hey, you're a god or anything like this. Paul's saying, right, the whole point is this. Whatever was gained to me, I consider loss for the sake of Christ. What's more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I've lost all things. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Christ and be found in him. Not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God on the basis of faith. The reward is having Jesus. The reward is knowing him. The reward is not, and I know him, and because I know him, he makes me do this, and I can see that the reward is him. Like when we get there in 70 odd years, because I'm going to live old, when we get there in like 67 years, I'm going to live to 104, it's a different story. And so like when I see him, I'm not going to be like, wow, and look at now what he's made me do. I'm going to be like, man, and this is it. All of the beauty in this world somehow is created by God and in his image, and we're going to be just blown away by him, not the stuff. We're going to be blown away by who he is. And I want more of that in my life now, that God, don't just help me to see the stuff. I'm blown away when I see our young people kind of stirred and challenged, and when we see him preach and we see things that God has given them, I'm amazed. But you know what? I'm just amazed that he does that in our lives, and that's what we want to be amazed by, not just what they can do. We want to be amazed by them coming alive in him coming alive in them, and seeing God just move in that way. And so the final kind of thing that I want to kind of just touch on is just this kind of one verse, and I think it's a few screens on, Rob, because I've got duplicates in. That is the one you know. And so the guy that we talked about, the guy that really is the one who has the pride of place, Jesus, at the start of his ministry, before anything happens, like before he's done anything, before he's got around and spoke, like he goes into the wilderness and he doesn't eat, he doesn't drink for 40 days and he's tempted. And the devil kind of says to him, right, okay, he led him up to a high place and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of this world. And he said to him, I'll give you all the authority and all the splendor. And it's been given to me, and I can give it to anyone that I want to. If you worship me, it'll all be yours. And Jesus answered, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And we don't talk, and Chris said, we don't talk about sin much. We don't talk about the devil much. And that's all right. We shouldn't talk about it loads. But it's naive of us to think that the things that God has called us to, that there is not going to be opposition to that, where a guy tries to take us away from that. And if I think of the person that I'm called to be and what I'm trying to do in terms of the young people of this church, I think there's two ways. He'll either tell me, you can't do this, you're not good enough, it's all too much, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know if that'll be that successful, because I know if I quit, I know that that's what I'm called to do. So that's not a great tactic. The tactic I think he takes is, and aren't you the hero? And aren't you good? And aren't you important? And that's when I take my eyes off Jesus. And that's when I take my eyes off the things that matter. And so he will come at us, and he comes here at Jesus before anything's happened, and he comes in 3 different ways. But at this one, he says, I'll give you everything. But Jesus knows, because what we have is we have a Jesus that can't be bought, he can't be flattered, he can't be discouraged, and he can't be stopped. And that is the God that we worship. And you know what? I want to be a church that can't be discouraged, that can't be bought, that can't be flattered, and that can't be stopped. And we can only do that when we really have our eyes fully fixed on him, because anything else will distract, it will take our attention, it will take our devotion, it will take our adoration, and then we can get knocked off the things that he has for us. And so he is the one who's worthy of all of that, and he can't be bought and he can't be stopped. And he has the power to transform us over and over. And I'm going to pray, and we're going to hand to Craig. So God, I just thank you that you don't want to sit on a shelf and amongst a bunch of other stuff that takes our time and our attention. God, I pray that you would invade our lives in every moment. Lord, when we are doing the busy stuff, God, help us to remember that you're with us. Help us to remember that your presence goes with us. But God, we want to see you. We want our hearts and our focus to be on you only. And I thank you that you could not be bought, that you could not be discouraged from your mission of coming to love a broken people. And God, I pray that you would put that same heart in each of us, that the things that this world would offer us, that we would see through them, and we would see to what you're calling us to do, and that we would see that knowing you is the thing that matters in this world. Help us, Lord. Amen.